So thinking of using podcasts to give your business a boost. Smart move. You're tapping into a huge trend. Podcasts are really exploding in popularity.
And for good reason.
In this deep dive, we're going to uncover how podcasts can totally transform how you communicate with your audience.
And turn them into loyal fans.
We're going to go beyond just listing formats.
We'll really get into the strategic thinking behind successful podcast content. You'll learn how to use podcasts to tell really captivating stories.
Establish yourself as an expert.
And even humanize your brand in a way that traditional marketing just can't.
All right, let's get into it. Our source material, an article called The Influence of Podcasts in Business Communication, jumps right into the power of storytelling. Two formats really pop out behind the scenes.
And success stories.
Why are these so effective?
Well, because they tap into something fundamental, that human need for connection through stories.
Instead of just listing your company values on your website?
Right. Think about a behind-the-scenes episode where your employees share personal anecdotes about how those values come to life in their daily work.
That's a powerful way to build trust.
Right, absolutely. And it gives your audience a real glimpse into your company culture.
It makes your brand relatable.
Yeah.
Not just a faceless corporation.
Exactly. It's like inviting your listeners in for a peek behind the curtain.
And success stories take this a step further. Instead of just saying, hey, our product's great, you let satisfied customers share their experiences.
In their own words.
It's authentic.
It's persuasive, and it leverages the power of social proof. Think about it. Potential customers are much more likely to trust the experiences of their peers.
Than a polished marketing message.
Exactly. It's like amplified word-of-mouth marketing.
But this deep dive isn't just about stories. It's also about sharing, specialized knowledge.
Positioning yourself as that go-to expert in your field.
Our source highlights two formats for this. Expert interviews.
And mini formations.
Now think of expert interviews as a way to borrow credibility.
Right. You bring on, leading voices in your industry, people your audience already trusts and admires.
And through those conversations,
elevate your own brand's expertise.
It's like saying, hey, these brilliant people choose to share their knowledge on my platform. Pretty powerful.
It is.
But not everyone has time for those long interviews.
Huh.
That's where mini formations come in.
Exactly.
So what are they all about?
Mini formations are all about delivering concentrated insights in a really digestible format. Imagine you have a key tip or strategy that could transform your listeners' workflow.
Okay, yeah.
You can pack that into a 5-minute episode, perfect for busy professionals who want maximum value.
In a short amount of time.
Minimal time, yeah.
So speaking of expert interviews, let's dive into some tips from the source on how to conduct them effectively. They emphasize choosing relevant experts. But what does relevance actually mean here?
Yeah, it goes beyond just, finding someone with a fancy title. The expert you choose should be someone your target audience really cares about. Someone whose knowledge directly addresses their needs or challenges.
So if you're targeting entrepreneurs, an interview with a venture capitalist might be better than an academic.
Exactly. It's about understanding your audience and finding the right match.
Okay, so you found your expert. What's next?
Thorough question preparation is absolutely key. Don't just wing it. Think about what your audience wants to know, what unique insights this expert can offer,
Okay.
and craft questions that spark genuine conversation, not just predictable answers.
And what about the atmosphere during the interview?
Aim for relaxed,
Yeah.
Think of it as a conversation between two passionate individuals, not an interrogation.
So create a comfortable environment, allow the expert to kind of open up.
Right.
It's also important to promote the expert, both before and after the interview.
Absolutely. Share their bio, highlight their achievements, direct your listeners to their platforms.
It's a win-win. You're providing value to your audience and strengthening your relationship with the expert at the same time.
But for sure.
And one more smart strategy. The source mentions repurposing content. I have to admit, I wasn't sure what that meant at first.
So repurposing is about getting the most value out of your content, transforming it into different formats. Let's say you just recorded a fantastic interview. You can transcribe it, create a blog post, pull out key quotes for social media, or even turn the whole conversation into a downloadable ebook or guide.
Wow.
You're basically multiplying the impact of your effort, reaching different segments of your audience through various mediums.
So from in-depth interviews to the quick, impactful mini formations, the source gives 5 key tips for creating really effective ones, starting with choosing a relevant topic.
Right. This goes back to knowing your audience. Don't pick a topic just because you find it interesting. Ask yourself, What does my audience need right now? What specific problem or challenge can I help them solve?
So provide real value, not just concepts. And once you've got your topic, the source emphasizes detailed planning,
Think of your mini formation as a mini masterclass.
right?
You need a clear structure, logical flow, and an engaging delivery to keep your listeners hooked. Don't ramble. Every second of that short episode is precious.
And speaking of keeping it tight, concise delivery is crucial, right?
Absolutely. You're competing for your audience's attention in a world of endless distractions. Respect their time.
But concise doesn't have to mean boring. The source actually recommends using visuals.
Which might seem counterintuitive for an audio medium.
I know.
But visuals can actually make the learning experience better by engaging different senses and helping memory. Think about how a simple diagram can clarify a complex concept.
Or a chart.
Yeah, a chart to make data easier to digest. You could even make slides with key takeaways that listeners can download later.
Okay, last tip for those killer mini formations, offer personalized follow-up. I love this because it really shows you're invested in their success.
Imagine you wrap up a mini formation on productivity tips. You could offer a downloadable checklist or invite listeners to a live Q&A where they can get specific questions answered.
So you're not just giving info, you're building a relationship.
Exactly. Now, let's shift gears to how podcasts can be used for building your brand and boosting audience engagement. Two strategies really jump out. Branded podcasts.
And audience interaction.
Yes.
When I hear branded podcasts, I think just slapping a logo on an episode. It's more than that, right?
Oh, absolutely. A truly branded podcast goes way beyond surface level branding. It's about infusing every part of the show with your brand's personality and values.
So like the music, the tone of voice.
Even the language you use,
Yeah.
it should all feel consistent with your brand identity.
Got it. So if my brand is all about fun and being quirky, my podcast shouldn't sound like a boring lecture.
Yeah, it should reflect that playful energy.
But even with a perfectly branded podcast, you won't build a loyal following without actively engaging with your audience.
You need that audience interaction. It's the key to turning passive listeners into active participants, building a sense of community and loyalty.
The source gives a great example. Imagine encouraging your listeners to submit questions,
Or feedback.
and then you actually weave their responses into future episodes.
It shows you're really listening to your audience, valuing their input, and creating a two-way dialogue.
Like moving from a broadcast to a conversation.
Exactly.
But how do you encourage that interaction in a genuine way? The source has a few more tips for creating that connected community. Where do we start?
Start by simply welcoming comments and feedback. Make it clear you value your listeners' thoughts and opinions, and create a space where they feel comfortable sharing them.
Like actively asking for feedback.
Yeah, responding to comments on social media, or even starting a dedicated online forum where listeners can connect with each other and with you.
So it's about belonging, being part of something bigger.
Yeah.
I love the idea of those dedicated discussion spaces. It's like an extension of the podcast itself.
Think of it as a virtual water cooler where your listeners can gather to chat about the episodes, share their takeaways, and connect with like-minded individuals.
It's all about community.
But none of this works if you're not being authentic and accessible.
So important. People can spot a fake a mile away, no corporate jargon, no robotic responses.
Just be real, be yourself. Show your listeners that there are real humans behind the microphone.
Like you wouldn't build a friendship by just talking AT someone.
Right. You'd listen, engage, share your own experiences. Apply that same principle to your podcast.
Be a friend, not just a broadcaster. Great advice. So we've talked stories, knowledge sharing, brand building, and community engagement. There's another layer to all this, the strategic aspect of podcasting. How do we use these tools to reach our business goals?
Right. Yeah, that strategic layer is where the real magic happens. It's about understanding WHY podcasts are so effective for hitting your business goals.
Whether it's, boosting brand awareness
Generating leads.
or becoming a thought leader. So let's break it down. What makes podcasts such a powerful tool for business?
Well, it's that unique mix of intimacy, engagement, and reach. Unlike a billboard or a social media ad, a podcast really enters your listener's world in a personal way. They're listening while they're commuting, exercising, maybe even doing dishes.
Yeah.
It creates a sense of companionship, almost like you're having a conversation with a friend.
Definitely different from passively scrolling through a news feed.
Yeah.
That's like you're actively choosing to invest your time.
Your attention in that podcast.
Exactly.
That level of engagement is so valuable. Now think about how that translates to building brand awareness. Consistent podcasting lets you craft like a sonic identity for your brand,
Okay.
a recognizable voice that helps you stand out from all the noise. You're not just telling people about your brand
You're letting them experience it.
through sound.
I like that. And as you build that loyal listenership, you're also expanding your reach organically.
It's like those book recommendations you get from a friend. You're way more likely to check out a podcast if someone you trust recommends it.
Word of mouth marketing at its best.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about generating leads. Podcasts aren't just about building awareness. They can be amazing tools for capturing leads and moving them through your sales funnel.
How does that actually work? Can you give us an example?
Sure. Let's say you have an episode full of actionable tips for small business owners, your target audience.
Good.
At the end, you offer a free downloadable guide that expands on those tips. But to get it, they need to give you their email address.
Boom. You've got a lead.
Exactly. And you've opened a direct line of communication.
And it feels less intrusive than a pop-up ad, right?
Right.
Like you're offering real value in exchange for that contact info.
You're not just asking for something, you're offering something valuable in return. You could also use your podcast to promote webinars, online courses, even physical events.
I see.
By strategically placing these calls to action in your episodes, you're gently guiding your audience towards those conversion points.
So it's all about alignment. Using the podcast to move your listeners further down the path to becoming customers. But podcasting isn't all about sales, is it? It could also be a really effective tool for thought leadership.
Absolutely. Podcasts let you position yourself as that go-to expert in your industry, the person people turn to for insights and perspectives. Think about those expert interviews we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
When you're consistently bringing on these thought leaders and industry pioneers, you're connecting your brand with their expertise.
Like you're curating a network of brilliance and your audience gets to benefit from that.
Exactly. You can also use your podcast to share your own research case studies or behind-the-scenes looks at your company's wins.
So you're pulling back the curtain, showing your audience what you're all about.
Right. That
Yeah.
transparency builds trust and credibility. It shows you're not just talking the talk, you're walking the walk.
Yeah, exactly. Now let's circle back to community building, which is so important for long-term podcast success. We talked about encouraging interaction, but how do you actually create a thriving community around your show?
Yeah.
It feels like there's a subtle but important difference there. It's not just about getting comments or questions. It's about fostering a sense of belonging.
You're absolutely right. Consistency is key. Think about your favorite TV show. You look forward to each new episode. You might even talk about it with friends.
Yeah.
Putting out your podcast episodes on a regular schedule creates that same sense of anticipation and ritual for your audience.
So it becomes a shared experience, something your listeners can bond over.
Exactly. And by nurturing that sense of community, you're not just building an audience.
You're building a tribe.
A group of passionate fans who champion your brand and spread the word.
That sounds like the dream.
Oh.
Turning your listeners into devoted fans who do the marketing for you.
It's a powerful outcome. But let's get real for a second. Our listeners probably thinking, this all sounds amazing, but how do I actually make it happen?
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about the what and the why, but what about the how? What are the actual steps to launching and growing a successful podcast?
It all starts with a clear strategy. What are your goals for this podcast? Who are you talking to? What unique value are you offering? You need a roadmap before you hit the gas.
It's like any business venture. You wouldn't launch a product without a plan, and a podcast is no different.
Exactly. Once you have your strategy, you can start thinking about the logistics, choosing a podcasting platform, getting the right equipment, and figuring out your show format.
And don't forget, marketing and promotion. You can have the best podcast in the world, but if no one knows about it, it's not going to do much.
Absolutely. Think about how you can leverage your existing channels, social media, email lists, your website. You can also connect with other podcasters in your niche for cross-promotion.
Collaboration for the win. And don't be afraid to experiment and adapt as you go.
The great thing about podcasting is its flexibility. You can constantly tweak your format, try new content, and most importantly, listen to your audience and adjust accordingly.
It's a dynamic medium that rewards agility. Earlier, we talked about how podcasts can humanize your brand. I think that's so crucial and often gets missed in traditional marketing.
It's about letting your guard down a little, showing your audience that there are real people with real passions behind the brand name.
It's about vulnerability, right? Sharing your story, your struggles, your lessons learned.
Exactly. People connect with authenticity. They want to hear about your journey, the ups and downs, the wins and losses. It makes you relatable, it builds trust, and it creates a deeper level of engagement.
So it's not about being perfect or projecting that polished corporate image. It's about being real, being human.
Letting your audience connect with you on a personal level?
Think of it this way. You're inviting your listeners into your world, sharing your thoughts, your ideas, your experiences.
And in turn, they're sharing their time, their attention, their trust. It's a two-way street.
But I can imagine a lot of people might be hesitant to share their story, especially publicly. What advice would you give to someone who's nervous or unsure about putting themselves out there?
I'd say start by asking yourself, what story am I excited to share? What unique perspective do I bring? What message do I want to leave with my listeners?
It's about finding your voice, your purpose, your reason for being in the podcasting space.
Exactly. And remember, you don't have to be a perfect speaker or a master storyteller to get started. Podcasting is a journey you'll learn as you go. The most important thing is to start to take that first step and share your voice.
That's a great message. But I'm sure some people have practical concerns too, like I don't have the time or the resources, or I don't even know where to begin.
Those are valid concerns, but they're often based on misconceptions. Podcasting doesn't have to be a huge time suck or super expensive. With the right tools and strategies, you can create a great podcast without breaking the bank or losing your mind.
Okay, so let's bust some of those myths and give our listeners some practical advice. What are some of the biggest misconceptions about podcasting, and how can we overcome them?
One of the biggest is that you need a fancy studio and expensive equipment to get started. The truth is, you can make a perfectly good podcast with a simple USB microphone and a quiet room.
That's great. It's about making it less intimidating and showing people that podcasting is for anyone with a story.
Exactly. Another common fear is that people don't have anything interesting to say, or that they're not good speakers. Everyone has a story, and with practice, anyone can become a more confident and engaging speaker.
It's about having that growth mindset and believing in your ability to learn and improve.
Right.
What about the technical side of things? I imagine that can be overwhelming for new podcasters.
It can be, but it doesn't have to be. There's a ton of user-friendly recording and editing software out there, both free and paid. And there are endless resources and tutorials online that can walk you through the technical stuff step by step.
So no need to be scared of the tech. It's all about finding the tools that work for you.
Exactly.
But even with all the technical stuff figured out, coming up with content can feel daunting. Any tips for brainstorming podcast ideas that will really resonate with your audience?
It all goes back to knowing your audience. What are they into? What are their struggles, their goals? What kind of content would they find valuable, entertaining, or inspiring? Think about the conversations you have with your clients or customers, the questions you get on social media, the topics you're most passionate about. Those can all spark ideas for your podcast.
So tap into your expertise, your unique perspective, and your genuine curiosity.
And don't be afraid to play around with different formats. You can have solo episodes, interview guests, host panels, incorporate storytelling, even do listener call-in shows. The key is to keep your content fresh and engaging.
Variety is key. But how do you actually get those episodes out there? Let's talk about the nitty-gritty of production and distribution.
Okay, so let's talk tools and equipment. As we said, you don't need a professional studio. A quiet room and a decent USB microphone will work for most beginners.
And what about software for recording and editing?
Lots of options out there. Audacity is a popular free one, while Adobe Audition has more features, but it's a paid subscription. You choose what fits your budget and technical skills.
Okay. And once you've recorded and edited your episode, you need a hosting platform. This is where your audio files live and where your RSS feed is generated so people can subscribe on their apps.
There are tons of hosting platforms out there. Each has its own pricing and features. Do some research and pick one that works for you.
So we've got our episode recorded, edited, and hosted. Now, how do we get people to actually listen? Marketing time.
First, make sure your podcast is listed in all the main podcast directories, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and so on. This makes it super easy for people to find and subscribe.
Like making sure your book is in all the major bookstores.
Exactly. Next, use your existing channels, social media email lists, your website, share teasers, behind-the-scenes stuff episode, highlights anything that will grab your audience's attention and get them excited about your podcast.
And don't forget about collaborating. Guest appearances on other podcasts are a fantastic way to reach new listeners.
It's a win-win. You get exposure to a new audience and the other podcaster gets fresh content. But remember, building a successful podcast takes time, effort, and consistency.
It's a marathon, not a sprint. Be patient, be persistent, and focus on creating valuable content that connects with your audience.
And most importantly, have fun. Podcasting should be enjoyable. If you're not passionate about what you're doing, it will show.
Passion is contagious. If you're genuinely enjoying yourself, your listeners will feel that energy and connect with your message.
For sure.
So we've covered a lot from the strategic why to the practical how of podcasting. But let's zoom out for a minute and talk about the bigger picture. What does the rise of podcasting tell us about how media is changing and how we consume information?
That's a great question. I think it speaks to our deep need for real connection in a world that's increasingly digital and often feels impersonal.
Podcasts offer that intimate conversational experience that's often missing from other types of media. It's like having a one-on-one with someone you trust, someone who gets your interests and challenges.
Exactly. And this shift toward audio is only going to get bigger in the coming years. As voice assistants and smart speakers become more common in our lives, we'll be interacting with technology in a more conversational and natural way.
It's almost like we're going back to our roots as storytellers, gathering around the virtual campfire
Yeah.
to share and connect. But this time, the campfire is global, and anyone with a microphone can share their story.
I love that analogy. It really captures the essence of podcasting. It's a democratizing force, a platform that gives everyone a voice. But what does this mean for businesses and content creators? How can they adapt and use podcasting for their own success?
That's the big question. What advice would you give to someone who wants to use podcasting to reach their business goals or build their personal brand? Yeah, it's a pretty exciting time. But how can businesses and individuals actually harness all this? What are the key takeaways?
Well, one of the most important things is just being authentic,
Okay.
People can spot a fake from a mile away, especially in podcasting where it's so personal. Share your story, your passion, your unique angle.
Yeah. I keep hearing authenticity, and it makes sense. People want that genuine connection, not just another slick marketing spiel.
Right, it's about being real, being relatable. Let your personality come through.
And of course, content is still king. It's not enough to just be yourself. You got to give your listeners something valuable.
Absolutely. Whether you're sharing knowledge, telling stories, or just entertaining, your content needs to be something they'll want to come back for.
So find that sweet spot, what you love, aim to you what your audience wants. But even with amazing content, you got to think about community. How do you create that feeling of belonging and turn listeners into super fans?
Engage with your audience. Respond to comments, ask questions, give them ways to interact. Think of it as building a two-way street.
I love that. It's not just broadcasting, it's inviting them into a conversation.
Exactly. And don't forget the technical stuff. Make your podcast easy to find, easy to listen to, easy to share.
So sound quality, right hosting platform, and make sure you're on all the major directories. Okay, back to our listener. They've heard all this about the power of podcasting, but where do they start? What's one thing they can do today?
I'd say start with a simple exercise. Think of one story you're dying to share. It could be your journey as an entrepreneur, a tough lesson you learned, anything.
Find that spark, the thing that makes you excited to share it.
Exactly. Once you've got that story, think about turning it into an episode. What format works best? Who could you interview? What unique value can you offer your listeners?
And once you have that vision, don't overthink it. Just do it. Record that episode, put it out there, and see what happens. You might be surprised.
Podcasting is all about the journey. You'll learn as you go. The main thing is to just start.
Take that first step. Share your voice.
The world of podcasting is out there. What's your story?
That's a great question to leave everyone with.
Definitely.
We hope this deep dive has inspired you to explore this amazing world of podcasting.
Until next time, keep learning, keep sharing, and keep connecting.
Happy podcasting, everyone.